Welcome back to episode 2 of That Morning Cup. Go get yourself a cup and let's get into this. The first thing I want to do is address the elephant in the room. I said by the time I was recording this, I would be done with Epictetus selected writings, but I'm not. I'm not even done with this yet. I have like 20 pages of this left. It's been kind of a slower read for me. Um, I don't know why. Yeah, to be honest with you. Uh, I think just because it is so information packed and it's not just a story that you follow along with, but it's a lot of just information that it takes time to read, and I want to take as much of it as I can with me. So you got to take it slow. It's just information overload. You're not just following a story. Um, but I got about 20 pages left of it, and it's a very interesting book. It's a little slow paced reading, I will say. It's not a good thrilling story like I've been reading. All my books have been fiction up to this point this year, and this is my first nonfiction of the year. And it definitely has slowed the pace down because it's a different type of interesting, right? It's not a story, but rather it's just an eye opener and it's the truth. I do recommend people read it. Uh, Take your time with it, understand it, and really grasp what he's saying, because I always had a inkling or an idea of not what this book would be about, but what the contents would be in this book. Like, I understand that our eating is extremely disturbed in America, and I wanted to learn more of the history of how we arrived here and all that. And obviously, agriculture is a big one, and the spawn of agriculture is the reason we have anything that we have in this world. It allowed us to settle down and create governments and create inequality and racism and other things, right? Not It wasn't only beneficial things that came out of agriculture, but there was a certain amount of there was certainly a large amount of negative that came from it, and there still is coming from it. So let's talk about some interesting things that I learned from this book. One is Betty Crocker is not a real woman. She was actually invented by a company that my girlfriend's brother works for and is based in Buffalo, New York. And that is General Mills, which has been around for forever. But they created Betty Crocker at around the dawn of the time that ultra processed foods was becoming popular, and people were kind of skeptical about it. So they created Betty Crocker. And Betty Crocker convinced women to not spend so much time in the kitchen and feed your children our, flour mix and our baked goods and that, which was highly processed. But you could do it quicker, and it was delicious and nutritious. And they advertised to women that were trying to just provide for the family and be good moms. They took advantage of that, right? And convinced these skeptical women to eat this highly processed foods. And this is a theme that you see throughout this book a lot, where advertising played such a huge role in us eating horrendous, made up food that if you reduce it, it reduces to nothing. It's a made up food like Cheetos, Doritos. Those aren't a thing occurring in nature, obviously, and Twinkies. But advertising played a huge role in it, and especially the advertisement towards children. I mean, you look at Tony the Tiger, which he tells you they're great, and essentially what it is, it's dessert for breakfast. There's so much sugar in cornflakes, and he talks about, if you break down like corn, per ounce of corn, there's 25 calories, right? And so they're called cornflakes. These are corn. But 1 ounce of corn equals 25 calories, and 1 ounce of cornflakes is 100 calories, right? So that just goes to show you how much extra added garbage is put into it. The advertisers just took pure advantage of these children, because they knew children would see this and then kind of beg their parents and nag at them like, come on, buy this, buy this, buy this, I want this, I want this. And eventually parents would cave, children eat it, and then they talk about this bliss point where manufacturers do extensive studies on human consumption, and they try to find the perfect ratio between salt, fat, and sugar. And that perfect ratio they're trying to hit, when they hit it, is called the bliss point. That bliss point maximizes the pleasure, and it triggers the reward system in our brain, and that's obviously going to lead to the encouragement of overconsumption, which is just pure market greed. It's just these companies trying to make the absolute most profit they can make and get the consumers hooked on their product. And he talks about how sugar and corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, is not technically like at its base addictive, but it is because it's triggering the reward system in our brain. And every time that we pick it up and eat it, there's something firing that's giving us that reward. Whether we consciously are like ashamed of ourselves for eating it or whatnot, there's something that's causing an addictive element to the food that we're eating. He talks about how the USDA, since there was such a surplus of food at the time, that they created our dietary intake for the day, the recommended amount, right, for the average male, and we know that today to be 2,000. Well, when they created that dietary intake amount, the recommended amount for maintenance, they added 50% onto that to try to dwindle down that surplus of food that we had. So that just kind of sets us up for failure, because if your government is releasing something to you that you believe, and this is your dietary recommended amount of calories and whatnot, and if you eat this, you'll maintain weight. Well, if that's 50% more than what they think it should be, they're already perpetuating overeating, overconsumption, which will lead to weight gain, which I can't remember totally, but I think he said today women weigh the same the women weigh the same amount as the average male did in 1970s. And he talks about how from 1970 to 2002, the average person gained about 25 pounds. So in 1970, the average man weighed around 165, 170, and now they're around 200 pounds. And the average woman today weighs around that 165, 170. And obviously that's more factors than just the government lying about what the average amount should be per day eaten to maintain. It talks about inequality, talks about poverty, marketing. It's a very interesting book. I highly suggest everybody read it. Something that stood out to me from the very beginning is he talks about soil health and how you have to rotate crops. It's good to, I think it's called fallow the land, where if you grow on it for a couple of years, leave it alone for like a decade plus to let it re-enrich itself and then be good for growing again. But once capitalism came into play and importing came into play, America realized wheat, corn, things like this were super good exports. They could make a lot of money on it. So majority of the farming went to just monoculture, growing one crop, which is absolutely horrendous for the soil. But profits were good, and people were making money, and wealth was happening. While the degradation of our country was a consequence of that. And then he goes into how once we started to realize that the yield every year was so low, we needed to rely on other things, such as fertilizers. Then we got into pesticides, and he just lays out the timeline of from agriculture to industrial agriculture through John Deere and that, which John Deere became popular because I guess the soil in the Appalachian Mountains was so hard to till up with the old school style of plow that John Deere revolutionized that, came up with a new style of plow with new material, the new angle of it and that's how he got big, which again caused a problem because tractors came out, we became so efficient at farming, right? We relied less on labor and there was this massive surplus. And since there's this massive surplus, price drops. And with that price drop, smaller farmers couldn't keep up because they had to produce more crops to stay afloat because of the low price from the surplus. And which ended up causing just, I mean, millions of farms to shut down. People couldn't sustain their living. Or the other option they would do is try to become more efficient, so they would take on debt. They would take out a loan. They would finance these tractors and that, and then they just couldn't keep up, and they would end up crumbling, right? Filing for bankruptcy and whatnot. And then as things got more expensive, they started having to buy fertilizer, these hybrid seeds, and it ended up becoming the agriculture or the industrial agriculture. It boiled down to just these massive landowners and farms that provided 2/3, if not more, of the food for America. And it's just interesting because you don't think about that much, and you don't think about it while you're eating, what goes into the food that you're buying from the grocery store, and that, and the negatives of it, and how corrupt that world is, that industry is. And when he starts to talk about sugar, he talks about how there was some nefarious things going on, and that's why fats were looked at like the devil, because I want to say the 60s or 70s, people started to look at sugar and go, is this high sugar intake correlated with these chronic diseases that people are dying from, and this weight problem that we're having? And Big Sugar started to get nervous, so they paid scientists to release journals and studies taking the eyeballs away from sugar and putting on things like fat. And they said fat was the problem. Fat's the devil. Fat's what's causing all this. And keeping their bases clear for sugar and high fructose corn syrup. And how regulation was minimal on how much sugar they could put into things, and labeling. It's a really eye-opening and interesting book. And it further perpetuates my belief in every day that I wake up. I've thought this for a couple months now. Every day that I wake up and I choose to eat clean. When I go to the grocery store and I stay on the outside of the grocery store, I don't go into the center. I don't buy Doritos. I don't buy these bad foods. To me, it's kind of like a revolt against the man, right? Against these advertising companies and these, he calls it in the book, big food. It's a revolt, and it's something that I can control, and I'm taking control of my life, and I'm making my decision. I'm not being persuaded by this big, flashy, bold advertisement, right? Like, if you think about it, think about these brands like Doritos, just candy, Skittles, all this. They're all big, flashy, colorful things. Fruit Loops, flashy, colorful. It's to attract you, for you to buy it, right? Meat doesn't have big, flashing colors. It's just meat in a little package. It's not as enticing visually as some of these junk foods. But I look every day at it like I'm revolting and putting myself first and choosing my health and not listening to these advertisement companies. And it's kind of like an FU to them when I wake up, and I'm not enticed. I'm not persuaded to buy this crappy food, which you're eating this crappy food that's making you feel like crap, and you're living a crappy life. Like, if you look at it from the very top to the bottom, it's negative, 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 negative. At no point is it a positive. The only small instance of positive you get is when you're eating it and you're tasting that flavor. But it's doing nothing for you. It lacks all nutrition. He talks about how, let me take a sip. They did a study where they gave rats a bowl of milk with cardboard in it, and I think sugar and something else. And that was more nutritious for the rats than a bowl of cornflakes, which is absurd. Cardboard and milk is absolutely nuts. And people eat that every day. Now, I understand how hard it is to get away from it, but I think a lot of people, if they read this book, if they read this and they took my mindset of it's a revolt, it's kind of F you to big food and the man, to live and eat healthy every day, that they would have quite the beneficial experience, and I don't think would turn back to those, for lack of better words, crappy foods. But then he talks about financial inequality and such, and how a lot of these nutritious foods are not readily available to a lot of people because they're expensive, because there's food deserts. Grocery stores don't really move in super close to poor communities. And he breaks down how food, nutritious food, shouldn't be a privilege, but it should be a right for all Americans. And we have just trillions of dollars in this country, trillions of dollars, and just so much food that we're exporting. How is it not possible for us to ensure that every American has the right to nutritious food? And that kind of bothered me a lot, because it makes so much sense. It's America, it spends so much time, and this theme is played out and talked about multiple times. You see it in this book of countries grow these crops with the sole focus of exporting them for money. We're going to export them. We're going to get all this money. And they don't worry about the citizens living in their country. And citizens in their country are going hungry. They're starving. They don't have money to feed themselves. And they don't have the land to grow crops to feed themselves. But yet this country is making trillions of dollars exporting this, right? And it's disturbing to think about. It really is. It all boils down to just corporate greed and money. And he lays out ways in the last chapter. It's called Moving Forward. I'm not totally through with it, but he lays out ways on how we could minimize this and how it could actually be financially beneficial for companies to worry more about feeding their citizens than other countries, right? And he talks about how I think it's Chile, they actually put tax on things like soda and quote-unquote junk food. Anything that they classify as junk food, they put tax on this. And this dropped obesity rates like crazy, which I did not know Chile had that many or that bad of a obesity epidemic. But he said almost 50% or maybe just over 50% of 6-year-olds in Chile at the time were obese. But he talks about how they put tax on pop, tax on junk food. They created community institutions and community groups to feed people, to ensure that, or provide rather, school lunches and breakfast for people. And now I'm not totally remembering all the facts, but it was pretty beneficial, and how easy it was, and how applicable it is and possible it is, especially in these poor countries than America. And he thinks America is going to be like the last to adopt any of this because there's just too much money in it and not enough care in it. He talks about Quebec. Quebec outlawed, or banned rather, advertisement to children under 13 years old for junk food and that. And again, junk food, the volume of junk food being bought dropped drastically. Weight problems fix themselves. Chronic illnesses dropped like crazy. All because they weren't advertising to small children to eat these just absolutely disastrous, like, I'm not even going to call it food, just disastrous concoctions of shit. I can go on about this forever. But I think everybody should take the mindset of every day you wake up and you decide, I'm going to fuel this body with nutritious, healthy foods. You're sticking it to the fucking man. You know, you're not falling victim to their marketing schemes and just their corporate greed. You're choosing to live your life happy and healthy. So please, please, please stick to the outside of the grocery stores. Only go on the inside if you need like your organic peanut butter and such. And certain little condiments in that. Oh, my bad, I hit the mic. And certain little condiments in that. Don't spend most of your time in the center of the grocery store. Hit that outside loop. Get your fruit, veggies, meat, eggs, milk, and whatnot. Now that we're done talking about nutrition and reading, I want to get into my next point, which also involves nutrition and eating and just physical exertion and that. About 2 weeks ago, I signed up for a marathon, which I never thought I would do that because when I ran the half marathon with my girlfriend, we finished that and I looked at her and I was like, babe, I love you to death. I'll do anything, but I'm not running a marathon because I knew after running the half, she'd be inspired and giddy about running the full marathon. And I said to her, I'm not running that. I'm not. Well, now fast forward, I don't know, maybe 8 months or so. And here we are. And I signed up for it. And my reasoning behind this was about, I think it was like 2 weeks ago. Driving to the gym, and even before that, for a couple weeks, it was bothering me after she signed up. I kept telling myself I'm not going to do it, but then I'm like, why wouldn't I do it? Okay, what's my reasoning behind not signing up for this marathon? And the only reason I could logically conclude was just simply because I didn't want to, which is like not a good reason at all, just because I don't want to. And I was like thinking, I'm like, it'd be fun to do it with her. We've done a 5K together. We've done an 8K together. We've done a half marathon together. Like, so it's only fitting to do a marathon together. And I'm somebody that always wants a goal kind of looming overhead or something to strive for. And like last year, uploading for 365 days was my goal. And now this year, I was kind of aimless. I didn't really have anything to strive for, to train for, anything, especially fitness-wise. Like last year was also my cut, losing weight and that. So it's like, So inevitably, I was driving to the gym, and I was really thinking about the marathon, and I was getting like this pit in my stomach of nervousness. And I decided to lean into that nervousness and not use it as an excuse to not do something. So I did. And I got to the gym and signed up for the marathon and sent my girlfriend a screenshot. She was obviously elated, super excited. But I was like really nervous. I'm like, wow, that's really serious. And I was like thinking about finishing the half marathon and how this is going to be double that. And it's going to be a grind. And now I'm somebody who notoriously hates running. I mean, I've hated it for years. And even when I did the half marathon, like training for that, hated it. But I decided it's time to take control of my mind and do something that makes me extremely nervous and that I don't want to do. Now, the past 2 weeks of running, which I ran a week before I signed up, I did like 20 miles. Last week, I think I did like only 13 or something because it was terrible outside. I could only go to the gym a couple days. But now this week, it's Wednesday. Yeah, no, today's Thursday. And I'm already 13 miles in. I did 5 miles on Monday, and last night I did 8 miles. And I was listening to Nick Bear talk on a podcast with, what's that dude's name? Max something? The king of Moab. And he talks about running comprehension. He said it takes a long time to get there, but after so long of running, you just get this comprehension for running, and you understand it. It starts to become pain-free-ish. Like, obviously, once you start to push yourself in that. But you could run at a good pace and for a long time and not feel pain. And my problem was always pain in my knees and my shins real bad. Well, I, knock on wood, should say that the past about 2 weeks of running, I think I've gotten that running comprehension. I've started to just, like, understand it intuitively. My body just, like, knows what it is. And I've been able to start off my runs at a pretty good pace and keep a really good pace for a long time and not be, super struggling. Like, my lungs go before my knees and my shins go, which is awesome. I hated that my inhibitor on running was not my lungs, or not my quads, or not my hamstrings or my glutes, it's my knees. It's my joints and my bones. Like, that sucked. But the past 2 weeks have been phenomenal. I've been genuinely enjoying running. I should say, though, when I ran the 8 miles, the last 3 miles sucked, and I didn't necessarily enjoy that because also it's on a treadmill. But I found my excitement towards it. I shouldn't say love yet because I don't love it for sure, but I am definitely excited going to the gym. I'm excited to put these miles in. And when I'm done, I feel so good. And I think a big factor in that was understanding and becoming okay with kind of cutting back my weightlifting. And I've always, for the past 2 years, I've wanted to become hybrid, right? I've been inspired by that hybrid type training style. I thought it was cool. I thought it's cool to be strong, muscular, and be able to run, not just be big and strong and be, cardiovascularly, what's the word I'm looking for? Tiny, cardiovascularly disabled. But what has helped me this time around at becoming efficient with the hybrid training style and sticking to it for the past 2-3 weeks is cutting back my lifting a pretty good amount. I go in and I hit a certain amount of reps and sets. I'm taking them to absolute failure. I'm not going in hitting 8 different movements. I go in and hit 3 or 4 different movements, take them to absolute, failure, and that has helped a lot. And my lifts actually feel way better because I'm not worried about having to hit 9 sets for something. I hit 6 sets or 5 sets to absolute failure, and my lifts are quicker, and they feel so much better now that I'm running. And I've come to the realization you don't need an hour and a half in the gym. You literally only need probably 50 minutes. If you hit them hard enough and get after it, you're more than good to go. Especially if you're adding running into that throughout the week. You're running 15, 20 miles. You'll be solid. And I feel just fantastic. So yeah, that's my update on fitness-wise is the marathon is going down. Hopefully it's not as bad as I think it's going to be, but it shouldn't be with how my running's been. I feel really good, and I'm excited about it, but also extremely nervous. So take this as a sign to do whatever is making you extremely nervous, because hopefully I can attest to this in a couple months here that it is worth it at the end. Assuming I don't die on the track. I don't think I will. That's going to conclude today's That Morning Cup. Episode 2 is done. By next week, I should have Epictetus, maybe not done, but pretty close to done and worked through. And this book I should definitely have done. I plan on finishing it today. So thank you for joining. I hope your cup of coffee was delicious, and enjoy your Friday and get ready for the weekend. I will talk to you guys next Friday for episode 3. Peace.